Welcome, and thank you for being here. This is a re-engagement data report training video, and this training video will be a walkthrough demonstration of the data report. And so just to get started here, on the screen, you see the data report in SmartSheet Gov. And we're looking at a complete data report. There's about 11 youth on this report for all active youth with a start date. All program entry fields are complete. You'll see that the fields in gray are optional. And for any inactive youth, so a youth who has already left the program, that they also have all end date information completed on this sheet here. You can see that I'm using the scroll bar along the bottom, which you can click and hold to scroll. There's also a scroll bar here, which you can click to hold there as well. One other point to orient yourself to the sheet is you can see that there are I for information along each column here. And so you can hover over for additional tips on the columns. But of course, for comprehensive information on this data sheet, I will refer you to the data manual, which is on the Reengagement Technical Assistance webpage. And one point to note here is that each individual column is described. And so you can open up the PDF on our webpage and you can click to the particular data entry field that you may have a question on. And as long as we're in the data manual, I'll also point you to part 2, eligibility guidelines. We're going to be talking about this in a minute. And so there are comprehensive descriptions, scenarios for each of the 4 eligibility criteria in the re-engagement data sheet. Okay. At this point, I want to give just a couple other tips with some functions in the SmartSheet Gov that hopefully you'll have some of these functions, and you can let me know if any of these are not working for you. One function that may be helpful is if you click on a row and then right-click, you can freeze the column there. And so you can use that scroll bar to drag. And if you freeze it someplace you don't want to, you can go ahead and unfreeze. And let's try again. So again, I click on the column, I right click, and then I freeze the column. So there I can see the name of the youth as I'm entering data across or looking at the data. Another function that may be helpful is if you go to the top of the column and again you right click on the column, you can use the sort rows feature. And so in this case, I put it in alphabetical order. And another feature, you can filter. So you may be filtering for blanks, or in this case, if I want to look at a particular criteria, I can just do that, select it, apply, and then it will filter it. Now, the way to remove the filter, there's 2 different ways. One way I do is I go up here and I turn the filter off. And so then I can see all the data again here. Another perhaps useful tip, let me just put this back to the top here. Another useful tip when working in SmartSheet is you can select Control C for copy and then Control V to paste that information in a cell. Sometimes I'm not sure why, Smartsheets can be a little bit particular. So sometimes I do Control C and I do it a second time just to be sure. And then I can do Control V for that paste function. And you can also do multiple cells at the same time. If you don't want to use a Control C, you can also select a cell, and then you can go from that bottom right hand, and you should be able to drag down to copy some information. To clear the cell, I'm using a delete function on my keyboard to delete something. Another tip is you do want to save your work as you go along. So it's important as you're entering data to save. It's not like some other applications which are automatically saving. Smartsheets will prompt you to save after every 10 minutes or so, but just be aware that you do need to save your work as you are going along. So there's another function that may help that I use a lot, which is, sometimes I'll want to see on these select all columns everything, but sometimes I just want to see a wider view. And so you also can select cells to do that, or you can select whole columns to wrap and unwrap. If that is useful for you, that's just another little tip there. Okay, so in terms of getting data onto this Smartsheet, there's two different ways. And so just very briefly, one way that you can add students' names is you can go across the row to add the student's name, and you can go along and do it that way. I'll go ahead and delete that information. And then the other way that you can add the information to the sheet is you can use the forms, which your grant managers may have provided, but do reach out to them if you need those links and don't have them. But those links for the data entry forms are under Forms, Manage Forms, and then here I can go ahead and open up that form. So this would be another way of entering the data. Once I would complete this information and hit submit, then that data is going to be populated as a row on the bottom of my Smartsheet. One little note is this particular form that I'm showing you is a restricted form where all program entry fields are required. And then in this particular case, the exit fields, such as the end date and whatnot, are unrestricted and are not required in order to submit this particular form. So that's the second way that you can populate information on that Smartsheet. All right. And so at this point, I'm just going to touch on a couple different rows and give you some tips and hints in terms of getting a really good report. Just little things that the grant managers are seeing as we're reviewing data sheets at this point. So the first one in this program year column, just note that the definition of returning is for a youth who had continuous enrollment from last program year to this program year. So a youth who was in a YDO-funded re-engagement program on June 30th and continued this biennium, this program year on July 1. So for example, if you are serving a youth in October and they exit the program completely and you provide all end date characteristics for that youth, and then 3-4 months later, they come back and they want to work with you again, you would not use returning. The returning is just across the program year for youth with continuous enrollment. Here you see the youth ID, and I'll just remind you that for schools and ESDs, provide the youth secure student ID number, so that ODE SSID number, and for other grantee types, you can create a unique identifier. So one youth, one student or youth ID identifier, which is unique to that individual. I may have mentioned that the gray columns are optional. And then the next column that I wanted to talk about is the eligibility code. The re-engagement programs are required to verify that a youth working with a re-engagement program is eligible for re-engagement program services. And so please definitely read the data manual part 2 about the eligibility codes. It's super helpful. But what we have here on this eye is just a little reminder of what criteria A, B, C, and D are. So you can always hover over there to make sure you're selecting the correct eligibility code. And now just a little bit of a tip on consistency. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to just look at criterion A here. And so this criteria is for youth 14 to 24 years who are not currently enrolled in high school. And so we're looking to get some consistency. So if we have criteria A selected here, and then in time out of school, we see none, then we're going to look and see that there's some kind of inconsistency. So either the time out of school is incorrect or the eligibility code criteria is not correct. So that's something to think about. And the other one that we might also be looking at is the entry status. And so here, these are all entry statuses that make sense for a youth who is currently not enrolled in high school. So let's take a look at another one. And so we'll look at criteria B here. And so criteria B is for youth 14 to 21 years who are defined as a dropout. And so they would be on a 10-day drop list, for example. And so here we're going to expect to see a time out of school at least 10 plus days and an entry status that makes sense with the criteria B. So in the pink here, you can see that the time out of school is 10 plus days followed by a brief period of attendance. And this would be applied in the scenario where, let's say that you're a CBO, you're working with a school, the school gives you a name of a youth who has been out of school for 10 or more days. And then by the time that the re-engagement specialist or case manager actually makes that first contact with the youth has returned to school briefly. And then the program and the youth decide that the re-engagement program is a good fit and they enroll in program services. And so in that case, criteria B would be a good selection because the youth was on a 10-day drop list. However, the youth had returned to school, so the time out of school would be 10-day plus, followed by a brief period of attendance. And their entry status in that case would be that they're in an Oregon high school. But if, say, for example, on this youth, that we've got 10 days plus at intake or program enrollment. And over here, we have that the youth is in an Oregon high school. There, it wouldn't really make sense that they would have an in-school status, but an out-of-school eligibility criteria selected here. Okay, so let me reset my sheet here. And so let's take a look here on these fields, which I have bolded for this demonstration. These are the end date status. So in this row 9 and row 11, both of these youth have left programming. And so their end date information is all complete. And what's really important to keep in mind about providing the exit date information is that if a youth has earned a GED credential or a high school diploma, it's really important that you mark both the type of high school credential that they earned, as well as the date that they have earned it. It's the only way that we can count those credentials earned. So make sure that when you're doing this, that the information is that we've got both the type of credential as well as the date. I really can't stress that enough. One thing that we're seeing is, please note that for active students, that you're not filling in the end date information. So we certainly don't want you to be counting credits every 3 months. We are expecting that you're monitoring academic progress, but you're not reporting that progress quarterly to us. We need that information when the youth exits the program, or we do go through an end date process in quarters 4 and quarters 8, which the data manual talks about at the very end of the data manual in attachment C. So for more information on end dating, you can see attachment C in the data manual. But one thing which some programs are using that has proven to be quite helpful is you can use the customizable and optional columns to track the credits going along as you need for your particular program. And so there's an optional credits at entry column where you can get their transcripts and record the total number of high school credits earned at intake, at program beginning. And then as the youth end the program, then you would be able to, so for example, here on the purple, this youth entered the program with 13 credits, and then at the end of the program, they had 19 total credits, and so then 6 credits has been recorded here. All right, and so just to move to a couple final points, I'd like to draw your attention to the optional customizable other outcomes and gains column. And so here we put some suggestions for other types of successes that the youth may have while in your program. And if you want to record those, it's a select all. You can certainly record those on this sheet. If you want to add for your grant manager to add anything specific to that dropdown, please reach out. We're more than happy to do that. And so just know that this is here for you to use if you would like to. One thing I didn't mention that I think is maybe important to mention. So we talked in the video too a little bit about program data at entry and then program data at exit, and talked a little bit today about that as well. One thing to realize is that there are columns where it's really a snapshot. in time. So a snapshot, a program entry. So for example, under employed, this is an annual entry field. So when the youth, that first day of enrollment in the program year, works with you, then you're going to be putting what their employment status is. And please note, some of these fields on this data sheet do require people to talk with the youth in order to gather this information. And so let's say, for example, that a particular youth is not working, not employed, at intake and enrollment for the program. And then maybe 3 weeks, they actually get a job. Because this is just a snapshot, a moment in time, you don't go back and change that and update that to employment. However, in the second year of the program biennium, if that youth is still working with you and the youth is employed at the first day of the second year of the program, because this is an annual entry field, and then at that point you would record that they are employed. And so just please note that there are annual entry fields as well. And so these are snapshots. We're not expecting you to go in and update these throughout the year, but really just at program entry. And then, of course, as we said, there's some at program exit, but there are a few that you will be updating annually. And so this, actually, I know there's a lot more to talk about. Please read the re-engagement data manual, and please reach out to your grant managers if you have any questions about the data. But thank you so much for spending this time to kind of walk through the data report. And thank you so much for your amazing work. And we just really appreciate everything that you're doing.